I would like to welcome you to the third in a series of autumn webinars about the set of new climate adaptation and risk assessment tools hosted at oasishub.co and how they can help you. So with more frequent flooding, storms and extreme weather, your role, whether it be in insurance, consultancy, municipalities or elsewhere, involves taking informed decisions about climate risk assessment and adaptation and resilience strategies. This includes analysis of current and future hazard and risk, climate change impacts, and the quantification of the damage and financial losses of a flood in a specific place. We understand that for many of you listening to this presentation today, that being clear about which flood tool to use isn't often an easy decision. So our webinars this autumn will help you understand the types of tools that you could consider by talking to the scientists and flood specialists themselves, like Previsico, about their state-of-the-art specialist flood tools. Will show the diversity of solutions available to you and help you decide which types of tool work best for the challenges that you're looking to address. So I'll post the link to the details of our next webinar and the two you might have missed in the chat box at the end of the webinar, as well as the link to the tool that we're going to be hearing about today. So it's Dr. Avi Baruch is the co-founder and CEO of Previsico, a global provider of real-time property level flood forecasts. Together with former PhD supervisor, Professor Dapeng Yu, they formed Previsico as a spin-out from Loughborough University in 2008 with the mission of minimising the impact of flooding globally. And today, Avi is going to present their flood forecasting technology, demonstrating how the tool has helped insurers and the government mitigate flood impacts this summer. He'll also reflect on Previsico's work transforming flood underwriting and claims processes. A global provider of real-time street-level flood prediction and analytical solutions. The tool builds round-the-clock resilience, continuously modelling inundation using the latest combinations of rainfall predictions. So we'll take questions after the presentations have been made, but please feel free to post them in the chat box as we go along. I will now hand over to Avi, but we've also got a quick poll to help guide exactly the focus of Avi's presentation today. So hopefully, if I have done this correctly, I will be able to launch this poll. So bear with me. So I don't know, Avi, whether you're able to take over the presentation.
I'm not able to share my screen just yet, actually. It says need permission from the host. There we go. Fantastic. So can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Perfect.
Hopefully the poll should have started by now, so we'll give that a couple of minutes.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope you're well. So yeah, as William mentioned, I'm Avi, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Previsico. So I formed the company together with my former PhD supervisor, Professor Yu, at Loughborough University a couple of years ago, where we kind of been working on this technology. It's been under development for the last 20 years. And we're really excited to kind of share where we are and how we're helping insurers, businesses and governments minimize the impact of flooding. So without kind of further ado, obviously flooding, as I'm sure everyone on this call is aware, is obviously a major global issue for the UK insurance industry. It cost 1.3 billion in 2015-16 floods. And events like Hurricane Harvey in the US cost insurers 33 billion. I think across the board, the losses and the impacts are far greater than just those numbers, partly due to the fact that those events caused so much misery for the people affected by them that kind of lasts until today. And also that there are a lot of then unforeseen and further continuous costs that occur over time. So this is such a big and growing challenge due to climate change, but one that really doesn't have to be as severe as it is. And I feel like the greatest example of the reason that flood events don't have to be as severe is when we see kind of photos like this, so a car park full of flooded cars, because we all know that with the right early warning systems, people could have then taken mitigating action in the case of a car moving it to higher ground. So we really believe that most flood losses are completely avoidable. And our mission is really to identify those and help people mitigate those. And there's been kind of growing evidence for this fact. So there's a very well-known kind of campaigner called Mary Donnell, where she's been working with the Environment Agency over the last few years of looking at how businesses are implementing resilience measures across the UK. And we have a few case studies. So this one here on the left is an art gallery in Hebden Bridge. This is a bookshop, a very famous one in Hebden Bridge, which their sign turns into a flood defense. This art gallery has, this is what they call their resilience shelf. So whenever they receive a flood warning, they put all of their possessions on the shelf, all their stock, and then again, all of their avoidable damage could have then been mitigated. With this flood defense, again, they help protect the bookshop, and again, moving items to higher ground too. And when we look at case studies like these, you can see that typically the losses that they might face, which, depending on the type of flood, it can be up to £150,000. All of these businesses were flooded twice, once in Storm Desmond and then once earlier this year in February. And the difference between the losses in Storm Desmond and this year are very stark. And a big cause of that reduced to, again, for many of them, they had no costs, or the cost was only a couple of £1,000s. So the savings was 75 to 100%. And the reason those savings were so high was because, again, they had started subscribing to the Environment Agency's flood warning system, and they had a very good flood action plan. And what we can see is also then their business interruption went down from several months, so up to 9 months, just a few days, and they were back up and running. And that's really encouraging because it really shows that the majority, at least for these small businesses, 40% of businesses affected by flooding go out of business. So just to see them back up and running and having their doors open just a few days after the flood event is really encouraging. And it shows how powerful using an early warning system and then subscribing to alerts can be. So I think when it comes to kind of flood resilience, there's a lot of work that's been going on, especially around helping organizations develop their own flood action plan, and members of the public also having a flood action plan. And this is something that needs to continue happening, and there's a lot of work on this, on all the actions that you can be taking and all the preparation and the training that you can do to help you and your team be more resilient to flooding. Then there's resilience measures, which, like flood defenses, flood walls. The key here, especially with these resilience measures, is they don't always have to be very expensive ones. To an extent, even one roll of duct tape is better than nothing, because you could actually defend quite a lot if that was the only thing you had, as long as you had an action plan and an idea of how to mitigate it. And the key, and often what is the missing link, is having that actionable flood warning, because it doesn't pay to have a flood action plan and resilience measures if you never know when to implement them. And this is clearly where we come in. So again, what we know is that most properties at risk of flooding don't receive warnings. So in the UK, we have Environment Agency alerts in England, Welsh in Wales, and SEPA alerts in Scotland. But the issue is that these are only really available for properties near large river systems. They're not available for ordinary watercourses or surface water, even though surface water is the greatest flood risk. So in England, it affects 3 million properties. And the same sort of situation is played out again and again across the globe, because for large river systems, there can often be gauges, but for small rivers, there aren't. And this is where there's a big kind of challenge across the industry. And this is also exactly why the Cabinet Office approached us to identify and help develop a solution. And our technology, as I mentioned, is under 20 years of development, and is now being used by the Cabinet Office. And it involves real-time simulations. So we have our own hydrodynamic flood modeling software, and we rerun all our modeling every 3 hours. And what we do is we run it in partnership with IBM's weather company. So we get rainfall forecasts 48 hours ahead, and we rerun them through our model continuously. And what this does is this then produces a footprint at the 25-meter level, showing the depth and time of flooding over the next 2 days. And because weather patterns are always changing, again, we continuously rerun our modeling to be able to capture those events well before they happen. Our model is globally scalable, so we're currently live across the UK and several global cities, as well as much of the US, and will soon be live across the whole of the US. We were also live back in November, so there was quite severe flooding about almost this time last year. And in red on this platform, you can see the Environment Agency alerts, and in blue you can then see our alerts alongside them, showing kind of surface water and small watercourse flooding in the surrounding areas. So this is our visualization platform. And again, we were also live over the summer, and there was a lot of flash flooding that occurred over the summer. And for all of these events, there wasn't really any Environment Agency warning because, again, they were occurring in small rivers, and also in most of it was surface water flash flooding, which is not the Environment Agency's responsibility. So what we had was we were able to then capture a lot of these events well before they happened, and we were then able to deliver alerts. And these, again, for lots of these areas, many of them previously hadn't experienced flooding before, we were then able to capture them, these particular events, 6 hours before, because again, it was a flash flood event that was from a very quick onset rainfall event. So again, while we run off forecasting 48 hours in advance, some flash flooding, again, you can only capture 6 hours in advance. But again, 6 hours is still plenty of time to be able to implement a flood action plan to an extent. And again, many of these people were then able to implement that. So as I mentioned, the first users of the tool and really the kind of proponents of it was the Cabinet Office. So the head of Resilience Direct in the Cabinet Office, Luana Vaglino, has really been a big supporter and has provided the platform for 4 cities across the UK to help coordinate the emergency response to flooding. So it's being used by the local resilience forums. We're also working on accessibility mapping with the Resilience Direct to help the London Fire Brigade be able to position their vehicles in areas where they can then rapidly respond to flooding events well before they occur. And as a company, so we spun out of Loughborough University in 2019, and our focus has really been on supporting insurers and their customers and businesses to help minimize the impact of flooding. So what we have are actionable warnings. And because we continuously model flooding, we're able to predict the depth and time of flooding. And then that can then be used by organizations to, for example, defend property, move contents to high ground, and implement flood action plans. Our visualization platform can then also be used to mobilize claims teams and support customers before the event occurs. And then also, as you have the footprint forecasted, you can then help rapidly identify fraud or be able to fast track genuine claims. So it just helps make the whole process a lot smarter and also be a lot more supportive to customers. For organizations and businesses, again, this platform can then also mobilize contractors, mobilize your operations teams to protect property if you have property across the country. And for governments, again, they're now able to use this to coordinate the emergency response plans. We also have our own data feed, which is kind of delivered through the API. And for insurers, this can then help implement new policy embargoes or estimate losses pre-event. And we also have a customized iframe that insurers can then provide to their customers as part of their own internal portals. So there's, as you can see, there's a few different applications. And one thing the insurance industry is particularly excited by is the ability to then use this to improve the policy given to a customer. So this year we're part of the very prestigious Lloyd's of London lab, where we participated with several insurers to develop a framework where, using the tool, we could then improve underwriting. And the framework, really what we did is we started separating out the types of losses that were occurring and looking at movable assets, immovable assets, and business interruption. And what we showed was that, again, while there's a lot of work that can and should be done on defences, actually getting started with just even the movable assets, there's a lot that you can do. So again, just by having a warning and an action plan, you know, between 10 and 100% of movable assets can be saved depending on the context. And we looked at several previous events where we were then able to calculate the savings as 10 to 100%. For immovable assets, again, there's a lot that can be done, but again, without flood defences, the savings are a bit more limited. Once you have then a flood defence, and again, this can be anything between kind of duct tape or very good flood wall and a whole set of measures, those savings can then be a lot higher, so 60 to 100. One thing that's obviously very clear from this table is that those savings, they're quite a wide range, and that's because we're looking at a lot of different use cases and a lot of different lines of business. So again, with household, there are always going to be some losses that are completely unavoidable, especially if it's a very severe flood. But again, what is always clear is that the vast majority of those losses can be saved and can be mitigated if you have advanced warning, and also if you trust that warning. Because the issue with kind of always responding to what a lot of people right now will respond to weather warnings, there's too many false alarms. So you just need something a bit more actionable, which shows that how at your property flooding will affect you. And then kind of the final one is on business interruption, and again, being able to save key records. In one case, you know, turning ovens off, etc., can then help minimize a lot of that business interruption. And so again, what we're doing with this framework is really working with insurance industry to help improve the policies given to customers. So whether it's a case of giving a no claims bonus to customers who are actively mitigating their flood losses, or also again, making it part of the policy, so providing it as a value add service. There's kind of a lot of ways that insurers are now starting to implement this framework to be able to provide a far better policy to their customers. Why is this so important? I think especially for the insurance industry, you know, from the sort of events that have occurred, we estimate that we could have saved typically about 10% of those losses just by using our email alerting platform. And you know, especially for those large events, that's a lot of savings. So you know, 146 million for Storm Desmond or 5 billion for Hurricane Harvey. But it's also those small events, the kind of the nuisance flooding that occur again and again, year after year, that this tool can also be really useful for, because we are continuously running. So then we're continuously being able to support customers. And that's really how we're then able to kind of, for a whole wide range of different events, be able to support insurers and their businesses and members of the public. And again, for the insurance industry, being able to then have that marketing to be able to be far more proactive in supporting your customers, then kind of provides added value benefits. So kind of as a summary, you know, this is a tool that we're really working very closely with the insurance industry to help make kind of the insurance contract a lot more friendly and a lot better for the customer by providing extra support and minimizing the impact. With governments, we're working very closely with the UK government, and we're looking to provide this service to governments across the globe to help them be proactive and support and implement the flood action plans and coordinate their emergency response. And again, for businesses, in terms of helping implement action plans to minimize loss, is again another really big application that we're working with on. So that's pretty much my presentation. I thought I'd keep it short and sweet for those of you who haven't had lunch yet, just to be able to again enjoy that lunch. But also I'm really keen to open up the discussion to the audience. I can see, at least from the poll, that we have a lot from insurance, risk management, consultancy, government, risk modeling, and non-profit. So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts and kind of also the challenges that you currently have with regard to flooding, and what your thoughts are on kind of how you can then use this tool in your organization. So William, shall we open up the conversation?
Yeah, we've had a question from my colleague Tracy asking how the email alert system links to the platform itself.
So yeah, our email alerting system, again, delivers those email alerts automated whenever there's a new forecast available. And again, there's a link from that to the platform, so you can then see your assets or the platform and then browse the event itself. And then again, that's also available again for government, insurers, and businesses. For some insurers, again, if they would like to deliver those email alerts themselves, they can by taking in our API.
Thanks, Avi. As you say, it looks like we have a good mix of insurance companies, consultancies, government agencies, charities, and international organisations here today. If any of you have a question, do feel free to pipe up in the chat box. I don't know, given the results of the poll, seeing sort of this wide range of different attendees here today, Avi, whether you had anything additional that you wanted to say to I guess those different audience members.
Well, again, I think the key here is that I'm really glad there's a wide range of audiences, because the key is that flooding affects so many different organizations in a very different way, and the principle is that the use cases can be quite different. And what I'd really encourage is anyone kind of who's watching this, who's kind of interested in learning more, to get in touch and kind of discuss your particular use case. If you want to do it over this seminar, or if you want to do it separately, again, my email is on the screen, so please do get in touch. It's something that, again, flooding affects everyone, and it affects everyone differently. So, but we all know that if you knew that a flood was coming up to 2 days before, there's a lot of actions that you could take. So it's all about kind of then seeing, especially kind of, I talked a lot about insurance today, but I can also see, there's a lot of non-profits. So we're now working in Kenya too on providing the service to informal settlements together with the Kenyan Red Cross. So there's so many different applications that, again, how that's used on the ground is very different, but the principle is the same, in that, again, how can, in your particular process, how do you currently respond to flooding, and what sources of information do you have available to you? Is it the Environment Agency warning, or is it the rainfall forecast? And how can then having a property level depth forecast for depth and time then help your organization?
Brilliant. We've had a flood of questions off the back of Tracy and my questions, so I'll go in order. The first one was from Pamela Collins, asking if you include vegetation or lack thereof on land or in water as a factor in predicting flood paths and depths, and do you have the data and parameterizations to apply your model outside the UK? And a similar one from Simon Hayes, asking, do you only operate in the UK, or is your solution available to the US market?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. And the key is obviously, so vegetation has a big impact on flooding. And so of course, it's included in our modeling process. So we do hydrodynamic modeling. And again, there's various kind of flood risk maps available on the market. And our modeling approach it is slightly different to theirs, but again, broadly we'd use the land cover, the geology, the vegetation, and that data is available globally. There's very good data in the UK and the US. So we've also, again, like I mentioned, is currently ready to be provided to customers across the East Coast of the US, and we'll have the rest of the US live very shortly. So it's something, again, where we're working with, this data is available, and we're using it in our modeling because it's absolutely crucial to be able to forecast it correctly.
We have a question from Michael Thomas asking if you can upload exposure data into the Previsico tool to assess impact on an insured portfolio.
So that's a really good question. Again, there's various ways of doing this. So it's all about kind of the processes that you have. And again, it's something that a big application for the tool. So I'd love to kind of be able to pick this up further down the line. So Michael Thomas, if you'd like to get in touch, be really keen to discuss that with you.
We have a question from Jai Ganesh, who asks, thanks for your interesting presentation. Exposure data are dynamic. What kind of systems are in place to update the data in the system?
So again, we redo all our modeling every 3 hours. So we're then able to provide a continuously updated data footprint, which you can then download through our API. Or again, so it's either if you want to view it on our platform, great, or if you want to look at your own API, then and gather and look at the data on your own system, you can. So again, it all depends on your process and your system and how you'd like to use it.
Roshan Wahab asks how accurate were the simulated flood hazard maps, both in terms of extent and depths, and also would it be possible for you to tell us what sort of 2D hydrodynamic model you're using?
So the hydrodynamic model is called flood map. So it's been developed by Professor Yu, and it's been kind of widely published in a kind of variety of different environments. So again, if you follow Professor Yu on Google Scholar, you'll be able to see his kind of track record, and you'll be able to see kind of the variety of different contexts where that software was used and applied. So again, what we're then able to do is we have several case studies, and again, since we've gone live with IBM, several more case studies to be able to kind of show how well we forecast floods. So again, we typically will be up to about 90% accurate. I think, especially with flash flood surface water, there's always, in some cases, you know, burst water mains, etc., that we cannot forecast. So you're never going to get 100% accuracy. But again, it's key about, you know, what do people have right now, which is kind of the weather forecast, and then how can you then be able to provide something, especially for those flash flood events, that can provide extra support.
Thanks. Eugene asks, does it have a place in the African market as well? Perhaps a similar question to earlier.
Yeah, so again, we're now working in Kenya. So we've got a pilot ongoing in Kisumu. So it is obviously the weather across Africa is very diverse. So we're again still partnered with IBM Weather Company on that, providing their kind of most likely weather forecasts across that platform and using it in our model. So it's again globally scalable, and it's part of our ongoing work there.
And unless anyone else has another question that they want to ask, we've got one last question. What kind of inputs does your model have? One or multiple weather modeled outputs? And what is the uncertainty levels of your forecasted precipitation amounts?
So yeah, that's a really good question. And so we use IBM's Weather Company, like I mentioned. They have their ensemble weather forecasts, and we will typically produce the most likely flood scenario, which is obviously the median. But again, we can also produce the kind of worst case scenarios too. It's all about kind of what do you need to make a decision. I think that's exactly kind of where there will always be levels of uncertainty. So it's all about providing the right footprint for you to then be able to make that call.
We had one more as well from Cesar Morales. What process is used to calibrate your models?
So we have a team of now about 20 people, and we continuously look at previous flood events. Whenever we forecast flooding, we look at data from the ground. We have our own sensors where we also then capture data to be able to calibrate our model. And it's something we put a lot of work in, because again, the more data we get and the more we're able to calibrate it, the more accurate it will be in the future. So it's something after every single event that we forecast, we investigate it and we inspect the performance. So we've now got a wide range of different data sources that we use for that.
Excellent. So I'm just going to check whether we have any more questions. It doesn't look like we do. Thanks very much, Avi. It's an extremely interesting tool, and something I hope everyone attending, whether they're an insurer, a business, or working in government, can use to mitigate flood impacts. Oasis Hub are here to help all of our attendees to find the right type of tool that you need. If you're interested in this tool that we talked about today, or any other tool that you find on Oasis Hub, please feel free to email us hello@oasishub.co, and we'll get back in touch. I've posted a link to this tool in the chat, and our email address, and also some information on our previous flood webinars and our upcoming flood webinars. Unless anybody else has any further questions, the next webinar that we have is going to be in a fortnight's time on the 2nd of November. Fathom CEO Andy Smith is going to explain the science behind the Fathom US flood hazard data, which provides climate change scenarios for 2020 and 2050, including data based on research from MIT to predict changing hurricane behavior. And he's also going to review the newly released global flood hazard data and discuss how it can be used for risk assessment, climate change analysis, and resilience management. So thanks again, Avi, for giving this presentation, and thanks to our attendees. Please do join us again.